If there's one moment that makes the Logan Federico case truly haunting, one mistake that turned a repeat criminal into a free man, it's this. A fingerprint that never made it into the system. The year was 2023. Alexander Devontae Dickey was back in custody again, this time charged with burglary and grand larceny. It wasn't his first offense. It wasn't even his 10th, but to the court handling his case, it looked like it might as well have been. When prosecutors pulled up his file in the South Carolina State Law Enforcement Division database SLED, the records were incomplete. Key convictions and prior arrests were simply missing. The system didn't show the full extent of his criminal history because somewhere back in 2014, after one of his earliest burglary convictions, Dickey's fingerprints were never submitted to the database. That one missing step meant that every case after that wasn't properly cross-linked. In the eyes of the court, he looked like a first-time burglar, not a man with nearly 40 arrests and a decade-long pattern of violence. As a result, the prosecutor, unaware of the full record, struck a plea deal. Dickey would plead guilty to a reduced charge and be sentenced to time served, the 411 days he had already spent waiting for trial in county jail. He walked out a free man in 2024 on probation. It should have been a victory for the overburdened court system, one less case clogging the docket. But it was actually the opening act of a tragedy, because that missing fingerprint, that tiny data entry error, meant the next time Dickey reoffended, the stakes would be unimaginably higher. When reporters later asked state officials how such a failure could happen, one investigator put it bluntly: if that fingerprint had been filed correctly, Alexander Dickey would have been in prison, not walking free in Colombia. The revelation caused outrage. South Carolina law enforcement agencies began auditing criminal files statewide, discovering that Dickey's case wasn't unique. There were dozens of offenders with missing data cases, where fingerprints were never uploaded, convictions not fully documented, or databases not properly synchronized. Each small mistake could mean a violent offender slipping through the cracks. For Logan's father, Stephen Federico, this wasn't just an administrative error. It was personal. It wasn't a typo, he told reporters later. It was a death sentence for my daughter. He wasn't exaggerating. Had Dickey's full criminal history been visible, prosecutors say the 2023 plea deal would never have been offered. He would have faced 5 to 10 years behind bars, likely still incarcerated in May 2025, when Logan went to Colombia. Instead, the system failed quietly, bureaucratically, fatally. The public didn't learn about this missing fingerprint right away. It came out weeks after Dickey's arrest, in investigative reports and legislative hearings. Each new detail deepened the anger. Lawmakers called for reviews. State leaders promised reform. But to Logan's family, it all came too late. Because in the time it took to type one wrong number, a killer walked free. And as outrage spread across South Carolina, that anger began to shift from the accused killer to the people sworn to prosecute him. Because when it came time to seek justice, the system that had failed once was about to turn on itself. By the end of June 2025, the Colombia community had buried Logan Federico, but her name hadn't left the headlines. The story had become a lightning rod. A young woman killed in her sleep by a man who, by every measure, should have been in prison. And now, the focus shifted from how it happened to how justice would be served. On June 25, 2025, a Richland County grand jury handed down a sweeping indictment against Alexander Devontae Dickey, 12 criminal counts, including murder, 2 charges of first-degree burglary, possession of a weapon during a violent crime, vehicle theft, and financial fraud for using Logan's stolen cards. A judge denied him bond. He stood motionless as the list was read, eyes blank, jaw set before entering a plea of not guilty. The case might have moved quietly through the courts like countless others. But Logan's murder had struck a national nerve, and soon, even the highest offices in South Carolina were watching. In September 2025, the state's top prosecutor, Attorney General Alan Wilson, made an unusual move. He sent a formal letter to the local solicitor, Byron Gibson, urging him to seek the death penalty against Dickie. Wilson's message was clear. "This case," he wrote, "represents one of the most heinous examples of preventable violence our state has seen. The full measure of justice must be pursued." The move was cheered by many, including Logan's family, who had already said Dickie should face the harshest penalty allowed by law. But inside the legal community, Wilson's decision set off alarms, because Byron Gibson, the elected solicitor for Richland County, didn't agree. He told reporters the Attorney General's demand was premature, even reckless. The investigation, he said, was still unfolding. Evidence was still being processed, and his team hadn't yet reviewed all discovery. Filing a death notice this early, he argued, could jeopardize the integrity of the prosecution. Behind the scenes, a rare political standoff began to unfold, a tug-of-war between two powerful offices, each claiming to speak for justice in Logan's name. Wilson, backed by the governor and a chorus of lawmakers, doubled down. He assigned one of his top capital litigation attorneys, Melody Brown, to assist Gibson's team, directly ensuring, in his words, the case would be handled with the utmost seriousness. It was an extraordinary step, effectively placing a state-level prosecutor inside a county case. For Logan's grieving family, the legal chess match felt unbearable. They wanted action, not bureaucracy. Every delay felt like another form of failure. Her father, Stephen Federico, said he was torn. He didn't care who prosecuted the case, the solicitor, the attorney general, or the governor himself, as long as his daughter's killer faced the maximum punishment. "I don't want politics," he told one reporter. "I want accountability." Meanwhile, Dickie's public defender filed the expected motions challenging the death penalty talk, requesting mental health evaluations, and insisting his client's record shouldn't prejudice the jury pool. By October 2025, the courtroom had become a stage for South Carolina's larger reckoning. How do you deliver justice in a case that exists because the justice system itself failed? In that question lies the heart of the conflict, a moral crossfire between vengeance and procedure, between outrage and the rule of law. And while prosecutors argued over statutes and strategy, one man's voice, raw, unfiltered, and furious, was about to drown them all out, because in Washington, D.C., a grieving father had been given a microphone, and what he said into it would echo across the country. A congressional hearing room isn't built for emotion. It's built for order: long tables, neat nameplates, microphones that hum just before they switch on. But on September 25, 2025, order didn't stand a chance. Because that morning, Stephen Federico, a father from Waxhaw, North Carolina, stepped up to the witness table, trembling hands, a stack of notes he barely glanced at, and started to speak about his daughter, Logan. Behind him sat photos of her, smiling, arms around her friends, her favorite color pink bright against the neutral congressional backdrop. "When I tell you this story," Stephen began, "think about your kids. Think about your daughter coming home from a night out, laying down, going to sleep, and feeling someone come into her room." The room went silent. Cameras clicked once, then stopped. Every word landed like a blow. He didn't spare the details. He spoke about how Logan was dragged from her bed, forced to kneel with her hands above her head, and shot point blank by a man who'd been arrested nearly 40 times and still managed to be free. "You woke up a beast," he said finally, his voice shaking. "You pissed off the wrong daddy, because I'm not going to be quiet until somebody helps." It wasn't just testimony, it was a warning, and it went viral within hours. Clips of that moment spread across social media, replayed on nightly news, quoted in editorials. The U.S. House Judiciary Subcommittee on Victims of Crime had expected statistics and policy talk. Instead, they got a father's heartbreak broadcast to millions. For Stephen, this wasn't about vengeance. It was about accountability, about a system that had logged every one of Dickie's arrests, but never connected the dots. He wanted answers. Why were repeat offenders allowed endless plea deals? Why had South Carolina's State Law Enforcement Division, SLED, failed to upload critical fingerprint data that would have kept Dickie in prison? And what would change to make sure no other family had to live this nightmare? Lawmakers listened, some visibly shaken. Others, cornered by reporters afterward, promised reforms. Within days, members of Congress and state legislators announced reviews of the SLED fingerprint system and proposed legislation to require stricter tracking of repeat offenders. But for Stephen, no promise could fill the space his daughter left behind. He returned home to Waxhaw, to a bedroom still covered in pink, still full of laughter, frozen in time. He started a foundation, not for profit, but for pressure, calling for tougher laws, better coordination between state agencies, and transparency for victims' families. And in his speeches since, he repeats the same line: Logan's spirit will live on to protect others. Her story had begun as another tragic headline, but through her father's voice, raw, furious, unfiltered, it became a rallying cry, a call for reform, a call for change, and a reminder that the most dangerous failures in justice aren't always in courtrooms. They're in the quiet spaces where data should have been shared, where a fingerprint should have been filed. The lawmakers in that hearing promised action, but as weeks turned into months, one question still hung heavy in the air: would anything really change? The months after Logan Federico's murder felt like a blur, grief wrapped in headlines, promises of reform tangled with politics. But beneath the noise, one truth remained simple: a daughter was gone, and a family was trying to make sense of a loss that never should have happened. As 2025 drew toward its end, Alexander Devontae Dickey sat in a Richland County detention center, facing 12 felony counts, among them murder, first-degree burglary, and weapon possession during a violent crime. He had pleaded not guilty, and no trial date had yet been set. The process would likely take years. He wasn't talking. Neither was his defense. But outside those courtroom walls, Logan's name kept echoing in State House speeches, congressional hearings, and the hearts of people who'd never even met her. In South Carolina, lawmakers ordered a statewide audit of SLED's criminal record system. Investigators discovered that what had happened with Dickie's missing fingerprint wasn't an isolated glitch. It was part of a much larger pattern of incomplete or delayed data across counties. That discovery triggered a wave of proposed reforms: a statewide fingerprint compliance law, requiring every arresting agency to upload prints within 24 hours, improved communication between courts, police, and corrections offices, reviews of plea deal oversight for repeat offenders. Officials promised to close the gaps. But for Logan's father, Stephen Federico, these changes were only the beginning. He kept traveling to rallies, memorials, committee meetings, wearing the same bracelet with his daughter's initials. In one interview, he said quietly, "They can change the law all they want. I just don't want another dad to have to sit where I'm sitting." In Waxhaw, the Federico family tried to reclaim a sense of peace. Friends painted the town with pink ribbons. A scholarship fund was created in Logan's name to support young women pursuing careers in education, the dream she never got to fulfill. Every year, her co-workers at Duckworth's bar still raise a glass of the pink cocktail they named the Lolo. The neon sign hums, and someone always says what they all feel: she should still be here. But the larger story, the one that outraged an entire state, still feels unfinished. How many other Alexanders are out there, hidden in databases, missing a single fingerprint? How many judges are sentencing people with incomplete records, never realizing what's missing? And how many lives are quietly waiting to be shattered by the next oversight? The case of Logan Hailey Federico is more than one family's tragedy. It's a mirror held up to a justice system that too often loses sight of the people it's supposed to protect. For Stephen, for Jacob, for everyone who loved her. That's the fight now, not just for punishment, but for prevention. And in the soft light of a Waxhaw evening, when the cicadas start to hum and her name drifts through conversation, you can almost hear it, that spark she carried, still alive in every person who refuses to forget. Logan's story began with laughter and ended in heartbreak, but what she left behind, the movement, the message, The fight may yet save lives she'll never know. This case is sickening on so many levels, Stephen once said. And it is. But from that sickness came something fragile and fierce. The kind of love that doesn't die when a life is taken. It becomes purpose. It becomes legacy. And maybe, someday, it becomes change.